Okay, so I guess a good starting point, I mean, it's a familiar situation, but it might be worth just reflecting on it. Sort of complexity, even crippling complexity, a lot of businesses are sort of being swamped by all this IT infrastructure, hybrid infrastructure, etc. The pandemic's probably made it worse because not only did you have on-premise or even cloud, but you then got a load of people working from remote locations. So clearly we could talk about that in its own right for Bible, but can you just sort of, I guess, summarize the extent of that pain for many businesses at the moment?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So absolutely, you know, when the pandemic hit, folks were in the process of transforming digitally before the pandemic, but when it hit, it really flipped things upside down. So you kind of look at what happened, and technologists were really, really relevant in making the business survive and continue to flourish. So they had two aspects that they needed to support. They had the working from home employees. They needed to continue that they're productive, but then they also had to make sure that the customers had the best digital experience possible. So what happened is you started seeing these transformation efforts increase exponentially. And what happened was it started to create a complexity inside the IT department that was starting to sprawl their entire real estate across many different aspects. So you saw a lot of acceleration of cloud computing initiatives that left these technologists supporting a patchwork of legacy hybrid cloud technologies. And it was just like a dramatic increase to complexity for them. So, you know, already being in a position where they were understaffed and challenged with getting things forward, this just exacerbated the whole issue. So what we saw, you know, when we did this report, the Agents of Transformation report, we saw these new priorities being set from technologists. So 82% of the respondents in the UK said that they have a new set of priorities and challenges. And the technology sprawl was definitely shown by the responses as well. In the UK, we're showing 72% of the folks in the UK said they now have this patchwork of legacy and cloud technologies that they needed to be able to support. And with 77% also saying that accelerated the cloud computing, you can kind of see how this is just now becoming a way of increasing demand on the IT staff, because this complexity has just been driven by a really focused business that needs to stay relevant. So adding this complexity, it adds a lot of data that needs to be analyzed. It adds a lot of areas of where issues can go wrong. And, you know, ultimately it's just put right on the backs of the IT staff to be able to support and keep this going.
And I guess as well, without added complexity, you know, someone's using a simple application, whether it's an employee or, you know, it's a customer facing app. There's even more places where performance issues need to be tracked out, etc. So presumably companies are even more now desperate to be able to understand, as I say, you know, whether it's their on-premise infrastructure, the cloud, whatever it is, you know, where issues might be going on, try and correlate that. Is that become more of an issue as well?
Yeah, that's absolutely become more of an issue. The fact that this added complexity, you know, just think about, how do you determine what the root causes of an application if it's got so many dependencies that are dispersed across a myriad of technology? So whether it's on-prem, cloud, hybrid, private cloud. So this added complexity just really makes it more difficult for folks to be able to sift through the noise and figure out what's going wrong. So again, with the report, we had 84% of the technologists in the UK state that, you know, cutting through that noise has become even more difficult to be able to understand and resolve issues in a meaningful way.
And I guess it's a sort of a chain of issues. So you've got the IT infrastructure that's impacting the applications and services that are being provided again to employees and customers. And alongside that, those application services are potentially impacting business outcomes and stuff. So you need something, I think you guys have coined the phrase sort of full stack observability. You need to be able to see that whole chain of cause and effect. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, the biggest challenge here is that when you look at the complexity driving across IT, when you look at the needs of the business to be able to continuously innovate and continuously keep their customers happy and stay ahead of the competition, the challenge really is that, you know, the technologists, they need to have that business sense to the application. And they need to understand that the decisions they're making are impacting the business. So when you kind of think about that, tying it together, that really brings across another challenge that IT has to deal with, because it's not just a matter of supporting the systems that you have in your specific domain. You have to have that full stack breadth. So all the technologies have to have a expanded level of capabilities and roles that they're going to be asked to do. And on the flip side, you have the business leaders that need to understand, how is my investments being impacted by technology? How is my customer user experience? How is my revenue or my conversion rates of my applications being impacted? So you got this, it's kind of like a two-headed approach here, where, you got technology that is really driving the business, and the business really is dependent on technology to, get through the pandemic, evolve beyond the pandemic, and grow and stay relevant to their customers.
So before we maybe look a little more at the importance and the benefits of the sort of full stack observability, AIOPS, etc., maybe you could sort of look at the downside. If you don't sort of have some kind of visibility, that kind of visibility, what sort of issues? I'm thinking, I don't know, silos in departments and stuff, and again, nobody quite knowing where to turn to resolve issues. How bad is it, do you think, if you're not up to speed?
Yeah, so that's really the major challenge at hand, right? So if and you just kind of put it in a personal view, right? If you leverage an application on your phone and it's not working for you, you simply delete it and move on, right? So that's the user base, or the consumer attitude of leveraging digital services. They have a very, very low tolerance for poor performance. And even if you see, 100 millisecond delay in your application, that equates to approximately 7% loss in conversions. So there's a hard number, and that's not a very big amount of a delay. That's 100 milliseconds, which is slow enough to turn somebody off of your application, but it's also an area of improvement that the technologists need to be able to narrow down and quickly pinpoint. So if you're not able to provide the tools that the technologists need, and you think about it, if you're building a business case to say, I'm going to build an application, or my business leader wants this application with these desired outcomes, including that business case needs to be the tools that the technologists need to be able to see the full stack of the application, but also have that business lens to understand, where do I prioritize to fix first? Where are all my decisions impacting the business? So that the tech teams need to know that. And you're right. The issues at hand are, if you're not performing properly, you can lose some of your user base. You can have a decline in revenue. You can have poor user experience, which then ultimately drives down your conversion rate of your application. So by not having this, it's really to a point where it's a must-have versus a nice-to-have from an IT perspective.
And you mentioned the phrase, the business lens there. How easy is it to provide a solution that allows you? Obviously, you're generating a vast amount of data and understanding of how the IT is working and its impact on the applications. But how easy is it then to turn that into sort of business information, priorities, and stuff like that? That sounds to me, without having expert knowledge, quite a tricky process to manage.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's actually enrooted in AppDynamics DNA. So about just around 4 years ago, we discovered that we're able to correlate the performance of the business. And what I mean by that is, how is the conversion rate? How is the revenue? What's the revenue at risk? We're able to provide that for a period of time. So what we do here is by giving them full stack observability, we're able to then correlate that to how the business is actually performing. And it's through a product we refer to as BizIQ. We give some things out of the box so people can create a conversion funnel. You can see a user journey map to understand what the user experience is. But ultimately, it's something that is fairly easy to get going and take advantage of that. But at the end of the day, it's really about knocking down those silos. And when you think about it, the business is so dependent on technology, and there's these inherent challenges inside of most organizations that you have a siloed approach. So when you have, your infrastructure teams, your network teams, your application teams, your security teams, all working in independent silos, the business has been historically a silo in itself. right? So everybody needs to have a seat at the table. And that's how we kind of view it, is you got to knock down these silos, enable collaboration. And, when you're building an application, this is where things have changed from back in the day when I first started in IT 25 years ago. We used to build applications and hope people used it. And we didn't really care if they did or did not. We just built the next application, right? So that's just the way it was back then. Now you're building an application with a business mindset or a business outcome that you're looking for. So having those tools to do a couple things: one, knock down the silo, get everybody on the same page that you're going after a specific goal of, hey, I need to deliver this for the business. And then also, having the right metrics so that the business leader can actually look at something and make sense of what's going on and the nomenclature that they understand, like what's the revenue at risk? What's the revenue coming in? Or what's the conversion rate of my user base? Or how even happy are my users? Or, how are they able to get the best experience possible?
I'm guessing as well, there must be a skill in when it comes to AIOPS, because obviously every business is different. They all have their own different sort of priorities, projects, etc. How easy is it to provide a solution that is, if you like, granular enough for an individual business, but also general enough so that any business can use it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, totally. Well, it's all based on the application, right? So if you have a business that has, say, I don't know, 25 different business teams with business applications, you're always going to set the outcomes and desire first. And then the solution that comes is going to be able to give you those metrics based on what those outcomes are looking for. So, being flexible enough to be granular down to each specific application is definitely key. It's really, if you're a big retail chain or something, it's really not, it solves a big purpose to say this is how well the overall retail chain is, but you want to get down into the products, you want to get down into the different segments and things along those lines, so that, when you kind of look at it, you have to be flexible enough where you can be specific to a certain line of business, but then also the overarching approach of how the business is doing overall. So it's not overly difficult, because the way that the solution I mentioned with Business IQ, we're able to then articulate based on each individual application by gathering that performance data and then correlating it to how the business is performing based on the outcomes you're looking for. So it's not difficult at all. And it's really, it's really the starting point of, how do you get going? And it's all based on set your business outcomes and then build the technology stack that follows, and then have your tools that overarch between the business and IT to give you those metrics and understanding to resolve issues, but also understand it from a business sense. And that also gives the technologist the ability of prioritizing. So when you think about that, you think about prioritizing, you have, the best example is you may have 25 alerts going on at one particular time. How do you know which one to fix first? Well, when you have that business lens to it, you can say, okay, these top 5 are directly impacting revenue. We need to focus on these first. The remainder of the 20 can be secondary issues to go and resolve. So you think about it from a couple different aspects. It's really about, ultimately hitting those business objectives.
And I'm guessing, the automation part is key, but the human element is not eliminated. So I'm guessing there's two aspects I'm thinking of. First, there's got to be some buy-in from the organization, because if you've got people that are slightly skeptical, you back to your silos, the server hugger or the storage guy doesn't want to sort of, join in, whatever. I'm not saying they're, the only guilty parties, but so you've got to explain and encourage and get everyone on board. And then secondly, however sort of smart the AIOPS, the observability solution is, you aren't totally eliminating some human, when it comes to decisions, you can't completely automate that process. Is that right?
Right. Well, first of all, I'm gonna have to steal your line, server hugger. I gotta use that. But so think about it again from, the challenge here, right? So say for example, you have an IT staff of, I don't know, say 10 people that are focused on supporting this application. And then during the pandemic, you now increase complexity by 3 times or 4 times based on driving these initiatives through cloud computing. Now, you've now taken this staff of 10 and you've increased their complexity by 3-fold. You can't expect that team to be as productive as they were prior to that without building some elements of automation in there. So, and again, the IT staff just doesn't have to keep the lights on, they have to keep innovating. So by putting them in a position where they have the right tools to start automating, that relieves them of some of those mundane tasks that they may have been doing before that took them away from innovating. And even when you think about it, by enabling to automate, it gives them back some of their personal time. So a lot of folks are working many long hours to be able to resolve things based on the complexity. And the other point I want to make is when you look at organizations of how they're structuring their teams that are supporting the critical applications, a lot are deploying what's the role of the site reliability engineer. So if you think about the site reliability engineer, I mean, obviously they're looking at driving business outcomes. They're looking at making sure that they can experiment and push the envelope as far as innovation goes. But their whole mindset is do it manually the first time and then automate. So they're constantly building automation as they go when they see something arise that really could benefit from automation. So sure, you got to have the human element there to decide what you want to automate, what's the most valuable thing to automate. But then also going forward, on the trend of complexity, you have to go down a path of automation. Otherwise, I think you're going to fall too far behind and you're going to paint yourself into a corner, and you're not going to be able to move forward and drive towards a strong innovation. And really, when you think about it, as you get more complex, when you want to effectively monitor that, you're going to be bringing in many, many more metrics. And if you think about it, if now I'm expanding my environment, 3x the size of what it was, how am I possibly going to do that from a human mindset? I think it breaks the scale of what humans can do just on the volume of metrics coming in to just cut through the noise to be able to understand directly where the problem's coming from. And again, with that business lens, you have the ability of prioritizing, and that can all be done in an automated fashion, and then move forward from there. But you make a very good point. Human element is still going to be there, but you have to have the mindset of automating what you can.
And just in terms of full stack observability, it makes it sound like, it's sort of comprehensive, but I'm sure it is, for what it does. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is there are so many of these different monitoring solutions. We may have chatted about it last time, but how many of those is AIOPS going to replace, or is AIOPS the layer that sits on top of your network monitoring and your DevOps and everything else and extracts the relevant information to make these business decisions? Or is it eventually going to sort of go down that stack and start doing more of the data gathering itself?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So when I guess you kind of have two issues. You have legacy monitoring tools that are good for, point solutions or point monitoring requirements that may serve a need at the time that it was deployed. Now we're looking at, full stack observability as being a suite of solutions that help get you to that desired goal of AIOps, or in automated fashion that can, drive the needs that you have. So, from our point of view, we have, an APM tool or a business observability tool that gets you to a point where you can see the full span of everything going on in your application. But as you start looking at, as you evolve, you have cloud technologies that need to be ingested. You have open source technologies that need to be ingested. So the move is not necessarily building out a point solution. It's about putting together a platform that allows you to grow and be able to ingest more content as you start to move forward. And again, having that business context is going to be critical from the start, so that you can make the decisions and make the pinpoint where you go focus on delivering your technology stack to drive to that successful business outcome.
And in terms of, maybe just in finishing, in terms of the starting point, I know people watching, listening will be at various points along the AIOPS journey, but I think some people recommend you just take a single app and stand that up with AIOPS and then move on. Because potentially, you mentioned, say a company with 25 apps, maybe that's a bit too much to bite off in one go. Do you have any sort of best practice advice in terms of the steps towards deploying AIOPS in an organization?
Yeah, for sure. So a very valid point of how to get started is you mentioned it, starting with one application. But I want to take it a step higher, because I think this is where I made the comment before about when you build an application, you have the business outcome in mind first, right? Then you have all your different silos of IT that are then able to focus on a single outcome that's being driven there. And going back to the Agents of Transformation report, and this is one of the stats that I found actually very interesting. The respondents of 96% of the technologists, so this is almost all of them, were having a barrier in their organization to be able to adopt full stack observability. And the key element there was that they didn't know how to build the business case on how to include full stack observability to the application. So to me, that means that you got to go to the business leaders and include that as part of the overall business plan that the business leader is driving. So I think there has to be, and this is the time is the, I mean, there's no better time than now, but the linkage between IT and the business leaders to say, you know, if this is the outcomes you want, this is the tools I need to be able to deliver this. So starting off with that business case is the best way to go. And that's generally going to be app driven. So you can get the business case, start with a single application, and then grow from there and start to roll out amongst other business leaders or mission critical applications that you may have. And that gives them the ability to properly monitor these applications and build that AIOPS mindset into these apps based on that desired business approach that you have, because you have a full collaboration going on. So from there, I think that's where, you know, the starting point is ensure that's included with any of these business critical applications, and then you can kind of go from there.
Okay, that's brilliant. I mean, do you have any final thoughts, or we covered quite a lot of ground?
Yeah, we did cover quite a ground. I mean, you know, realistically speaking, I think full stack observability is really a critical need, especially with the sprawling IT estate that we have. If technology, and you know, realistically speaking, too, you have technologists that are really swamped, and they need to get that the right tooling to be able to deliver. So I think right now is that, you know, the time is of the essence. Full stack observability is something that people need to have on their plate, ensure that they have that business context. And again, you know, going back to the conversation of automation, that has to be in your roadmap as well. So understand, you know, how to build some automation into your support efforts. And then, you know, it's a way forward. It's really about, you know, enabling technologists to be able to deliver, innovate, and help drive the business.
That's brilliant. It's been great to chat to you today, Greg. So thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.